Temaet i dag er phishing. Hva er phishing? Hva burde man se etter? Hvordan burde man få brukerne og de ansatte med på å ta del i egen utvikling og skjønne hva man burde se etter og løse problemet, rett og slett. Så vi kan starte først og fremst med å ta en liten introduksjon av oss. Mitt navn er Espen. Jeg er CEO i Cyberon. Jeg jobber for det meste med å tilby løsning og tjenester på det meste innenfor sikkerhet til bedrifter og kunder hos. Lasse?
Yeah, my name is Lasse, so I'm a cybersecurity engineer in Cyberon. I work a lot with the phishing solution that we're using through Viper and are doing a lot of the phishing campaigns and helping the customers set up the progress.
Sean, I hope your speaker is on. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Bobel. I am a sales engineer with Viper Security Group and Inspired eLearning. I'm looking forward to speaking with you all today.
Yep. Yes, so we're going to start out with talking about the current landscape in threat landscape in cybersecurity. Phishing has been one of the top contenders when it comes to the threat landscape for several years now. It is also one of the most common vectors that attackers use to gain access into your organization. Over 77% of small and medium businesses in Norway has received phishing emails at one point, and this is no sign that that is going to go down any further either. And over 88% of incidents is due to human error. So that's why this is such an important point for us.
So you can have, hopefully, all the security solutions in place, like endpoint solution, firewall, lots of web filtering and such, but the main problem is usually the end user. So it's the person that sits in front of the computer who handles web surfing or receives emails and so on, and you can instruct them to do safety procedures online, but you can never be certain that they actually know what they're doing. They're not security experts. We can't demand it of them. So we need to have other solutions in place in order to safeguard them. So as mentioned, phishing is the main topic, and it will always be a big issue because it's ever evolving. Especially here in Norway, we can see more and more targeted attacks. It's not the common Nigerian prince that's offering millions of dollars anymore. It's emails written in Norwegian with proper logos saying that packages waiting for you, or
people acting like executives in the company trying to find information.
Could be neighbors, could be colleagues, everything. And but the main goal from a phishing attempt is either to get your personal information, like credit card information, personal ID, or as we see more and more in business, it is the user credentials. So gaining access to an AD account or some accounts that you use in the services of your company, so they can get access. They can gain valuable information of your company. They can misuse it in other attacks, or simply extort you for money.
It's also an attack type that is very fairly simplistic to execute as well, because the only thing you need is an email and domain, and being semi-good at crafting emails.
Yeah, and there's a lot of free tools that the attackers use, so they don't have to spend a lot of time crafting these emails. It's not expensive for them, and yeah, they have a lot of resources doing it.
This, of course, has also expanded to SMS phishing as well, that a lot of people has probably noticed, that you get an email that the package is waiting for you, and and you need to go and pay a certain amount to receive that package. So it's an extent that just keeps on growing as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of money involved.
Yeah,
basically.
We're going to go through a small checklist, at least a beginner checklist of what to look for. So some of the most common things that you find in phishing emails is, of course, the misspelling in text and links. This is kind of a proof that it's not coming from a legitimate source, or that it's coming from somebody that doesn't speak the language fluently enough to actually craft an email perfectly. This is actually something that we see a lot of places has improved, that people, they have gotten a lot better at writing emails the last couple of years.
Yeah, but another thing that we're seeing is, for instance, in domains or in from email recipients, they just change, like, for instance, the O with a 0, so it's even more difficult to see with your naked eye. You actually have to investigate the content.
Yeah. Another common vector is the short deadlines. So the attacker will try to add something that's maybe 48 or 24 hours deadline on an email. This is to try to push you into not reading the email properly and make you uncertain if this is something you should really do now quickly before something gets deactivated or something, you lose files.
Or there's a package waiting. There's
or a package
waiting
waiting.
from Posten or PostNord that's saying that you need to pick up the package within a certain amount of, or it's overdue, so you have to quickly fetch it.
Yeah. A more common one that we see a lot these days is abnormal request from colleagues or managers. So kind of having that in mind when you receive an email, is this something I would actually receive from that person? You can kind of narrow it down a little bit. Why would your colleague ask for personal information for you, or billing information and stuff like that? Checking the sender and email domains is also something that should be taken accounted for. A lot of these scammers try to use domains that look similar to the original one, but with some small differences. Something else is, of course, also, is it likely that you would receive this email from that company or from that service? Is worth checking out. And it's also important to remember that you should never answer anything that asks for personal or bank information in a service. We have some examples, as you saw in the previous one. There was a link, for example. If we had hovered over that one, you could clearly see that it's not leading to posten.no, but leading to actually Viper's service. In this one as well, you see that you get a short deadline that you need to complete this before a certain amount of time. But two common factors with them as well is the sender and receiver reply domains that are slightly off on this one, where it's something Microsoft, but it's not something that is actually owned by Microsoft. So these are important things to check.
We also have quite important parts on if you're exposed to this, what do you do as a user? What are your routines? And we actually have a template which we're gonna share. Because if you're unlucky to click something, you should know what to do. It's not just click and forget or hope that nothing has happened and hope for the best. You should inform your IT manager or security responsible person on what has happened, what type of email it was, when was it, especially, so they can track and see if something else had happened on your computer, or if it's been resent to other in the company, or perhaps they can go into their mail server and see if this email has also gone through to other in the company, and then block it.
As well as gathering as much information as early on as possible in an incident will always aid in the progress of limiting how much it will damage.
Yep.
That's why we create this kind of simplistic forms that the companies can use, because that will help you actually gather the relevant information as quick as possible.
Yeah, and it's important to know that usually end users or employees aren't, they're not security experts, they're not IT professionals. So making it easy, the easier you can make it for them to both report and know what to do in incidents are quite important. It helps them, but it also safeguards your company and environment to ensure it's being properly handled. Over to you, Sean.
All right. Yeah, all of that is fantastic information. And something to add, of course, we all know phishing is the #1 threat. Well, that's evolving even more with the use of AI. So things are becoming more challenging to discover as the malicious actors are using AI to write in people's styles and automate those things through API usage into news sites and things like that. So it's an increasing threat, and it's just going to get worse. So the best way that you can combat phishing is to educate your employees and yourselves as much as possible about the threats that we all encounter in our work and personal lives, or as we say in the e-learning world, educate effectively and reinforce often, right? So the security awareness content that Cyberon's deploying is developed by adult learning specialists. And these specialists study how to change behaviors. Because adult learning is based on science, what we know is that adults need to see the value in training material. And the more that you train people, the more that they'll remember. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But what they can take away from it that furthers their interest or help them, or essentially answers the question that we all ask, what's in it for me, right? Why am I doing this? Whether it's training or really anything, we always ask ourselves, well, what's in it for me? In the case of cybersecurity, what they can learn to keep themselves, their jobs, and their families safe is key. Now, we also need to be able to relate to what we're learning back to things that we know and situations that we've been in, and that's how we design content. Multiple scenarios that people are in their daily lives, in their work lives, in their home lives. So we answer not only the why am I doing this to keep the company safe, but why am I doing this to keep me safe and my family safe, which makes the training that much more relatable and memorable. If we can go to the next slide. Now, of course, keeping it relatable and whatnot is important, but it's got to be engaging and it's got to look good and it's got to be entertaining, or at least keep you engaged with the content, right? So, would you rather like watch a video like the one on the left where it looks like a PowerPoint essentially? Or would you like to see something like on the right, which is a little bit more cinematic and has a little bit more action to it? It's going to keep you a little bit more engaged with the content. Now, I know I've sat through some training that I thought was some kind of scientific study to see how long somebody could stay awake, and I'm sure we've all been there, right? you're just wishing the course would end, but relaying the information in a more interactive and entertaining way keeps the learner engaged, interested, and actually looking forward to the next course, which is something that we hear quite often. People that take training want to get the next course. They want to know what's coming down because they enjoyed and they learned something from what they just took. And it was something that they were able to use not only at work, but at home, and also share with their friends. Go to the next slide. Now, throughout the, I think that was playing the video. Yeah. Now, throughout the content there are also going to be some knowledge checks, interactivities, and quizzes that help hold focus. So if I'm able to start my training and then go down to the coffee shop or go somewhere and have lunch and come back and my training's done, that doesn't help me, right? That's just something that I did to check a box. When you have these interactivities spaced throughout the content, it makes people stay engaged and stay focused. Next slide. Retention. Now, this is actually the biggest concern that companies have, because a lot of companies address training as a simple compliance requirement. So they're looking to check a box to say, yes, we did it. And maybe it's a prereq to get cyber security insurance, or some regulation, but they really just do the minimum necessary to check a box. Now, the strategy of doing that will satisfy the requirement, of course, but it's not going to be effective at all. The reason that it's not effective is because of what we're seeing on screen, the forgetting curve. Now, studies show that information learned is quickly lost over time. For example, you can see here, employees lose about 50% of what they're taught in a course within 10 days and almost 90% within a month. So there was a psychologist, Herman Ebbinghaus, that wanted to understand more about why we forget things and how to prevent it. His research produced that forgetting curve. Actually, I think, no, we can stay here. We can go back or stay here, which is a visual representation of the way that learned information fades over time. Now, a couple of the aspects that he discovered about memory were that memories weaken over time, of course. If we learn something new, but then we make no attempt to relearn that information, we remember less and less as the hours, days, and weeks go by. The biggest drop in retention happens soon after the actual training or after learning a topic. Now, this is reflected by that steep curve in the first kind of bluish purple color there. Now, without reviewing or reinforcing what we've learned, our ability to retain the information plummets. For example, you may leave a webinar, this webinar, or a meeting with your teammates with your head just full of facts and figures, only to remember that a few hours later, you can't really remember what you actually learned, and you can't remember those facts and figures. Now, the way that something's presented also affects learning. So the same set of information can be made more or less memorable depending on how well it's communicated. So we do take those things into account also within the training content that Cyberon is providing. Now, you'll likely find it easier to remember something that's more organized, logical, presented clearly, just as the training that we're talking about. So memory is obviously important for our survival. Our brains are good at storing information that helps us avoid physical or psychological harm. We're particularly good at remembering the things that we need to know, details that are of vital importance to our survival. For example, food we should avoid, areas we should stick to, and the people who are important in our lives. We also need to remember experiences that trigger powerful emotions, such as fear, success, or relief. But this means that many of the things we want to learn can drop out of memory all too easily, which is what introduces the forgetting curve. So the most important discovery that Ebbinghaus made was that reviewing new information at key moments on the forgetting curve, you can reduce the rate at which you forget it. The approach is often referred to as spaced learning or distributive practice, which is what we're seeing on screen, where you have training that's consistent over time. Now, even though our memory fades quickly, a review session soon after the original learning can certainly improve it. Reviewing and refreshing information regularly halts the forgetting curve, and although forgetting starts again after each review session, it's slower than before. So that's why each curve here is shallower than the previous. Reviewing information like this at strategic points after you've initially learned it will stretch your recall and strengthen the memories encoded in your brain. Next, please. Cyberon's pre-curated learning paths and custom learning paths start with the foundational security awareness course that's going to serve as kind of like the baseline for employees and covers all the topics like privacy, malware, phishing, working remotely, incident response, all of the things that everybody needs to know. But the subsequent reinforcement is going to focus on specific topics like we see here: phishing, ransomware, mobile security. Repeated learning and reinforcement like this every month can have a dramatic impact on the learner's retention of the information and will start the transformation of your employee base into that strong defense that you need on the outside, protecting your organization's assets. Next. But training reinforcement isn't just courses and videos and screen, backgrounds and emails and attending webinars. You have to also do phishing simulations to support the training. And when you do those phishing simulations in conjunction with some training content as part of an actual learning path, you can dramatically reduce learner susceptibility to phishing attacks, which is the end goal, right? Of course, we know that phishing simulations are an exercise that tests your organization's preparedness against phishing by sending out phishing simulation or simulated phishing emails to everybody. What that does is, the security awareness content, the training is going to cover the theory, where the phishing simulations are going to put that theory and what they've learned into practice. Now, this kind of testing is proven to be super efficient. When employees get to test their knowledge in a real life scenario, the learning retention rate dramatically increases. Research has shown that phishing simulation programs, once implemented, increase that learning retention by about 2x over 12 months. So that forgetting curve starts going away as you train longer and longer. In our experience, the most effective defense against phishing attacks is awareness training combined with the phishing simulations. So by combining these training methods, you get the best of both worlds by conveying both the theory and the practice. This, again, increases learning retention and makes your employees more prepared for phishing attacks, which in turn significantly strengthens the security of your organization. So with that, we'll hand it back over to the Cyberon team.
Thank you, Sean. As we've gone through, it's the main issue or struggle for companies is actually getting the users engaged in learning and being aware of the different threats that's out there. So what we do is we're quite aware that usually a company has some sort of platform for testing or awareness for users, but our experience is usually it's launched as a one-off, or it's forgotten, or it's taken up again in the security month and then back again. So based on research, for those brief moments, the user gets a boost of knowledge, but in the long term, it doesn't matter. In a matter of weeks, it's all gone, and you're back to scratch. So we do this as a service. We have Viper in the background and helping us do this, but we have a long-term perspective of it. So it's continuously, each month we send out tests and follow up with courses relevant to whatever we agreed upon, so that you actually can rely on the information being relayed to the users and followed up, especially to the degree that's we want. And we also follow the trends. So if it's Christmas, it's packages.
Yeah, we do kind of custom make a couple of templates that will fit the season. That's true. It is also very important to note that creating this kind of security culture in your company will not only aid with you minimizing risk and specifically ransomware attacks, but it will also aid you in your goal, trying to reach a certain goal. This is something we are working very hard on to kind of define. So we're creating this yearly type of wheel about how our solution is built up with the customer to see how it fits them the best.
Yeah, and it's continuous work actually, and it is a continuous cooperation with the companies that we offer this to. Because each company is different. You have different goals, you have different users at least, and but the main essence is that we provide small short videos for education purposes, because as also experienced, if it takes too long, if it's too complex, users will drop out initially.
As well as trying to create a culture where it shouldn't be embarrassing to go to your manager or the person in charge of IT and tell them that, hey, I just pressed the link. I need someone to help me now. Because as soon as you have a culture where people don't want to let you know that they have done something like this, that's when the extent goes a lot further than it needed to do.
Don't yell at the user, applaud them. If they actually have done something and come to you, that's exactly the response you want.
because this mistake can happen to anyone in any company as well. This is not something
Admins
that,
as well.
yeah.
So,
This is something that can happen to anyone. So, and even though filters gets better every day, attackers also gets better at sending emails that are avoiding those filters.
yeah, and they can also inject themselves into correspondence between employees as well. So it gets harder and harder. So yeah, but that's like the essence of what we provide through the service from us. And that was, I think that was all for now. Do we have any questions? Do you see any over there?
Not yet. Yeah, of course you can just write questions in both Norwegian and English, and we can answer that.
Yeah, and if you have questions regarding our services or the solution and or come up with some questions after, you can send us to the emails that you see on the screen and let us know.
We have one question coming in. Does your training focus on phishing only or malware also?
All of the above.
Yeah, so the main focus of the solution itself is, of course, the phishing campaigns that we run, but the courses are very varied from defending against phishers or spear phishers, defending against ransomware, how to work from home safely. So the extent is a lot bigger, and also ranging to USB security.
Yeah, we can also drop trackers or tests on USB set that you can deploy in your company, and then we can see if someone picks it up and puts it in a computer. And of course, if it's an unknown USB device, you shouldn't. That's not best practice.
So it ranges quite well from not only phishing, but that is of course the main focus in the solution we provide.
Yep. Good. Anything else?
Not so far.
Nope.
Sean, maybe you have some final words.
Yeah, really, it's just that was actually a great question, because you shouldn't just focus your training on one specific threat, because there's a lot of threats. As we talked about, there's a threat landscape out there. So it's not just phishing. There's social engineering. What you put on social media actually can help phishers craft more specific emails. So you really have to be safe in your entire digital life. And the training does cover all of those topics, like you mentioned, and more, right? The Internet of Things, how to be safe on social media, typo squatting, safe web browsing, you name it. And another very good benefit of the training is it's actually available in 17 languages, off the shelf. So regardless of what your preferred language is, there's bound to be one there that is your preferred language. Which is going to also help with that retention, because if we're trying to learn something and also something new and also translate it, in our minds, it becomes a little bit more challenging. So, fantastic question. And yeah, if there's any other questions, we can take them. Otherwise, it's been great, and thank you for inviting me and having me on.
Yeah, we have one more question that came in. If security training will be enough for the new NIS regulations that are coming to Norway?
Well, I think it's first and foremost for the public and those who have digital services, but it's been worked upon, so we can expect it to be implemented in the private itself. So it's a security regulation that's coming in from the EU. So I know that some companies or providers already have some requirements regarding testing or awareness training on employees. So you can watch out for it to be implemented anytime soon, but we don't have any deadline there, I think. So.
Yeah, this is of course new regulations that the Norwegian government is now taking into account that will at one point be implemented, so it will be a requirement after some time.
Yep. Cool. I think that's about it for now. As I said, if there's any questions or something you want, then just drop an email and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your time. And Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Be seeing you.